The text came in at 11:04 p.m. the night before Thanksgiving. I was brushing my teeth when the screen lit up on the counter. Mom, Claire, don't come tomorrow. Evan doesn't feel comfortable. Let's keep the peace. That was it. No hi, honey. No, I'm sorry. Just 3 lines. I stood there for a while, toothbrush and hand foam in my mouth, staring at words that somehow weren't shocking, but still managed to sting. I had made the reservation 3 weeks ago, picked the restaurant because it was halfway between us and close to my uncle's nursing home, paid the deposit, ordered the wine in advance so it would breathe just right when they arrived, and now I wasn't invited. Evan is my younger brother by 2 years. He's 36, a mechanic by title, but not by employment. My mother Janice has always said he just needed a softer path. My father Robert rarely comments. He hasn't, not really, since the year Dad nearly lost the house and I stepped in with the check he never asked for. But that was years ago. And somehow, tonight, the house I helped save was hosting a family dinner I wasn't welcome at. I didn't reply to the message. I didn't call. I just walked into the kitchen, opened my laptop, and pulled up the file I hadn't touched in 6 months. Family expenses do not share, .xlsx. It started as a way to track odd little things. Gas money when Dad's truck broke down, the copay from Mom's root canal, the car insurance payment. Evan forgot 3 months in a row. But over time, it became something else. A kind of record. Quiet, unasked for, but meticulous. The screen glowed in the dark kitchen rows and rows of numbers stretching into years. 2009, mortgage hold $5,600. 2012, Evans DUI legal fees $2,800. 2015, HVAC repair paid directly to the vendor $3,400. 2017, tuition balance for Evans' second failed program $100. Birthday trips. Groceries. Emergency vet visit for the dog. Evan adopted, then dropped off at my apartment. And at the bottom, a red cell I'd flagged but never investigated. Second mortgage unknown account activity flagged June. I didn't remember what triggered that flag. Maybe something Mom said in passing. Maybe a paper I saw in Dad's garage. I had meant to follow up. I stared at that line longer than the others. If they had needed help, they could have asked. That was always the rule, or so I thought. But lately, I'd been wondering whether help was just what they called it when I gave something they didn't want to take responsibility for. The first time I remember being called steady, I was 3.5 standing barefoot on the front porch of our old ranch house in southern Illinois. The screen door had slammed behind me again, and my dad turned from the driveway, a coil of garden hose in one hand. "Claire," he said, not angry, just tired doors close easy when nobody slams them. Inside, my baby brother Evan had started crying. He wasn't even 2 yet, all curls and soft cheeks and loud lungs. Mom scooped him up from his playmat and gave me that half smile she used when she wanted to correct and comfort at the same time. "You're the steady one," she told me. "That's a good thing." It stuck. The phrase, the tone, the way her hand gently patted Evan's back while she said it. I don't think I understood it then, not really. But I must have absorbed it because from that day forward I tried very hard not to slam anything. I was the one who remembered to bring the library books back. I never needed help packing my lunch or finding my shoes. When the dog ran off, I was the one who stood in the backyard with a flashlight until she came home. Evan was allowed to be wild, emotional, full of energy. I was steady. I was the hinge that didn't squeak the plate that never broke the child who didn't need chasing. It was meant as praise. I know that now. But it also meant I learned early how to stay quiet so others could be loud. How to be dependable, invisible, and still somehow expected to hold the house together. And no one ever asked if being steady came at a cost. I was 21 when the market collapsed. Just out of college, still sharing a 1-bedroom with 2 roommates working remote contracts that paid late and praised never. It wasn't much, but it was enough to start putting things away, small investments, slow and steady like everything else I did. That fall, Mom's voice cracked over the phone. "It's not looking good," she said. "Your dad's worried, but he won't say it." I drove home that weekend 4 hours in a borrowed car. Dad was outside fixing the porch railing with a wrench too small for the job. He didn't look up when I walked up the steps. "We're fine," he said. They weren't. There were 3 missed payments on the house. A second mortgage floated to pay for Evan's trade school, which he'd already dropped out of. The letters were stacked in a drawer by the phone under an old church bulletin and a pile of clipped coupons. I didn't ask permission. I just called the bank, gave them the routing info from my account, and cleared the arrears. I didn't want a thank you. I just wanted to stop the quiet panic that had begun to settle over everything. Mom found out a week later. She called me, said you shouldn't have. Then she added coffees on. That was it. I think I believed back then that being needed was the same as being wanted, that if I did enough, gave enough, held up the shaky corners, someone would eventually look up and see me standing there, but no one did. Not then. Not when Evan wrecked a car in 2012. Not when Mom's bridge work wiped out her dental coverage. I just kept giving, steady as always. And somehow, the more I gave, the easier it became for them not to notice what was missing. I woke up before sunrise on Thanksgiving morning, not out of habit, but because sleep had left sometime around 3 and didn't return. The kitchen light was still on from the night before. A list of side dishes sat on the counter half-checked. I opened my laptop, logged into the restaurant's booking portal, and canceled the reservation. 24 seats, 2 high chairs, prepaid wine pairings. I paid the remaining balance anyway. I didn't want anyone saying I caused a scene over money. Then I opened a new email. Subject, since I won't be at dinner, attachment, family expenses, do not share, .xlsx. I didn't add commentary, no long explanation, no anger, just a brief note. Since I won't be joining you tonight, I thought you should have this. It's everything I've covered since 2008. For context, I'm closing the tab. That was it. I clicked send and closed the laptop. There was no satisfaction in it. Just stillness, like finishing a long day's work in a house no one else stayed behind to clean. I made coffee, poured it into the mug Evan gave me 5 years ago that said world's best backup plan. He'd laughed when he gave it, so had Mom. I'd smiled too. That's what you do. But I hadn't used it since. That morning I held it in both hands. Let the weight of the porcelain sit there a while. Then I poured the coffee down the sink, rinsed the cup clean, and set it gently in the back of the cabinet, behind the mixer, where no one would reach for it by accident. The first voicemail came just after noon. Dad measured as always. Claire, your mother's upset. Evan didn't mean anything by it. You blindsided us. That's not how we do things in this family. He hung up without saying goodbye. The second was Mom, voice cracking. Sweetheart, you know how your brother is. Sensitive. It's been a rough year for him. Don't let one misunderstanding ruin everything we've built. She didn't mention the file. I wasn't sure if she had opened it yet. By evening, Evan had texted twice. The first said, seriously, you're keeping score now. The second came 5 minutes later. Hope your money keeps you warm. I didn't reply. Instead, I sat by the window with a blanket over my legs and let the light fade without turning anything on. The inbox filled slowly. A cousin asking if I was okay. An aunt saying she wished someone had said something sooner. No one asked what was in the spreadsheet. No one asked why I sent it. Only why now? Why this way? Why I couldn't have handled it quietly like always. And that was the part that stung the most. Not the disappointment in their voices, not the defensiveness, but the assumption that I was still the one who should have kept things from falling apart. The envelope had been sitting on the mantel since June. Cream-colored no return address, my name, written in my father's shaky handwriting, neat but uneven like the lines had cost him something. I hadn't opened it when it arrived. I remember picking it up, flipping it over, sensing it wasn't a birthday card or a thank you note. Just a thickness to the paper and a kind of weight I wasn't ready for. So I'd tucked it behind the ceramic clock and left it there. That Friday night, after the last text from Evan and Mom's third call in as many days, I took the envelope down and opened it slowly. Inside was a clipped stack of documents and a short note on lined paper. Claire, we've made mistakes. I've made mistakes. But you need to know what's going on. I didn't know where else to turn. Dad. The first document was a bank statement for a joint account in my parents' names. Small withdrawals over time, $60, $85, $120. Then, larger ones. A transfer for $1, $200 labeled repairs. $800 from a grocery chain near Evan's apartment. Another for $350 to a boutique he used to tag on Instagram. The second page was worse. A scanned email between Dad and a financial advisor. Their house, the one I'd helped save in 2008, had been quietly refinanced twice. The latest loan was behind. They were weeks from missing payments again. Then came the sentence that stopped me. She says she's handling it. But Rachel Clare can't know. She's done enough already. He never said that to me. Not once. But there it was. Quiet, buried inside a digital conversation he likely hoped I'd never read. And now, even if they weren't asking for help, the damage was already done. The house, their security, the foundation they'd built their lives on it was all slipping away, and the person they trusted to fix it was the one they'd just uninvited to dinner. I met with Miriam Kane the following Tuesday morning. Her office was in a converted Victorian just off the square, all worn hardwood and filtered light. She came highly recommended by a colleague who once described her as surgical with silence. That turned out to be true. Miriam was in her 50s, compact, sharp-eyed, not unkind, but clearly not one for small talk. I handed her the stack I'd brought the bank statements from Dad's envelope, the flagged email printout, a few years of my own records, and the spreadsheet I'd sent on Thanksgiving Day. She laid them out on her desk in slow, precise rows, skimming with a pen between her fingers. No raised eyebrows, no commentary, just the steady shuffle of paper. When she finished, she leaned back slightly and said, "What you're describing isn't just unfair. It's patterned financially and emotionally, and you've been underwriting it the entire time." I didn't say anything. I didn't need to. She tapped the pen against the edge of the desk once. "They've learned to rely on your silence, your steadiness. If you want to stop that, we need to create structure they can't undo." That word stuck with me. Structure. So we made a plan. We would establish a private trust. The family home would be purchased under the trust's name, with my parents retaining lifetime residency rights. They couldn't borrow against it. They couldn't sell it. If anyone tried, the trust would freeze and lock everything down. Next, I would pay off the debt's credit cards, medical bills, 2 personal loans on one condition: every transaction would be documented, notarized, and tied to legal boundaries. Evan wouldn't be included. That wasn't up for discussion. It wasn't about revenge. It was about oxygen. And for the first time, I was building something I didn't have to carry alone. That evening, after leaving Miriam's office, I stopped at the grocery store. Nothing major, just a few things for the week. I paid in cash, something I hadn't done in years, and drove home in silence. Back at the apartment, I plugged in my phone and noticed a missed call from a number I didn't recognize. No message notification, but something nudged at me an itch in the back of my mind. I opened the voicemail archive. There it was, dated 2 weeks prior. The voice was male mid-40s, maybe clipped and professional. "Hi, this is Tom Reeves from First Capital Credit Union. I'm calling for Claire Holden. I just wanted to confirm a cosign request submitted on October 30th for a new personal line of credit listed under Evan Holden. If you could give us a call back to verify authorization, we'd appreciate it." He ended with a callback number. No urgency, no red flags in his tone, but the implication sat heavy. I never got that request. I never signed anything. And yet, there was my name, my credit, my identity used without even a text. I saved the voicemail, forwarded it to Miriam, and didn't call the bank back. I didn't need to, because what I felt wasn't shock. It was clarity. There was no misunderstanding anymore, just evidence. We met at the house on a Thursday morning. It was cold but bright, the kind of Midwestern winter day that smells like frozen leaves and something burning 2 houses down. The kitchen hadn't changed. Same pine cabinets, same old maple tree visible through the window. The same ceramic clock ticking above the stove, still 5 minutes fast. Dad wore his brown corduroy jacket, the one he used to throw over the pew during church. He had his Timex on the one with the scratched face and worn leather band. I remembered giving it to him when I was 16, using babysitting money and a coupon from the Sears catalog. He took it off and placed it beside the trust paperwork like it might interfere with the pen. Miriam walked us through the documents page by page. No one interrupted. No one objected. Mom asked one question about the residency clause. "So this guarantees we won't be forced out. It guarantees you'll never lose this house," I said, "but you can't borrow against it again." She nodded once. They both signed, slowly, carefully. Their hands moved like they were tracing a map they'd never expected to read. When it was over, Miriam slid the folder shut and reached for the notary's stamp. Mom glanced at me and whispered, "You didn't have to do this." I looked her in the eye. "No," I said. I didn't. No hug, no apology. Just the sound of the stamp clicking into place and the scratch of a pen returning to its cap. Outside, the wind picked up, tossing a few brittle leaves across the driveway. Inside, no one moved. He showed up 3 nights later just after 8. It had been raining most of the day, and the air smelled like cold asphalt and wet cotton. I heard the knock before I saw him, 3 sharp raps spaced evenly like he'd practiced them on the walk over. I looked through the peephole. He was soaked through, no umbrella, just a hooded sweatshirt clinging to his arms. No rage in his face, just something sour and hard like a bruise refusing to fade. I opened the door halfway. "So that's it," he said. "You just buy the house and cut us all out." I didn't answer right away. Instead, I picked up the folder I'd left on the entryway table and handed it to him, already flipped open to page 4. Beneficiary restrictions, clear as glass. "You could have told me," he said, not looking at the page. "You didn't have to be sneaky about it." "I did tell you," I said. "Every time I paid your rent, every time I covered your overdrafts. You just didn't hear it because I never yelled." He took a step inside, arms folded. His voice dropped. "So what now? You're done with me?" "No," I said quietly. "You were done with me the moment you stood by and watched them disinvite me from a table I set." He blinked. Once, then again. "It was Mom's idea. It was your silence." He looked down, then away. The paper in his hands curled slightly at the edges from the damp. "So what do I even have left?" I held his gaze. "Whatever you choose to build." He nodded once and stepped back. No slam of the door, no last word. Just the soft sound of wet shoes retreating down the hallway. And for the first time in years, I didn't feel guilty. Only light. The days that followed were quiet in a way I hadn't felt in years. Not the kind of quiet that waits for a phone to ring, but the kind that settles into corners and stays there. I opened my calendar and deleted the recurring reminders. Dad's cholesterol checkup, Mom's dental cleanings, Evan's lease renewal. I canceled the automatic flower deliveries I'd set up years ago. Mother's Day, Father's Day, just because. I paused at each one before clicking remove, as if the system might ask me if I was sure. It didn't. That Friday, I came home from work and didn't hear my phone buzz once. No one asking if I could wire money for a late bill or book a flight for someone who lost track of dates again. The apartment felt still. I took off my shoes, turned on a lamp, and cooked dinner for one without rushing. I made roasted vegetables, warmed a slice of sourdough, poured a glass of wine. Nothing fancy. But I tasted every bite, slowly, without waiting for a doorbell or an apology. I used to think this kind of silence would feel like loneliness, but it didn't. It felt like room, the kind I hadn't had in a long, long time. It was a Tuesday morning when the voicemail came. The voice was unfamiliar calm, a bit gruff. "Hi, this is Tom. I work over at the old flooring warehouse off Fairview. I think we found something with your name on it from a property cleanout. Might be worth a look." Fairview. That was the street my parents lived on before the house changed hands before the trust. I showed up that afternoon. The place smelled like paint thinner and damp sawdust. Tom, mid-60s denim shirt belt full of keys, met me at the door and led me past rows of half-open boxes. "Didn't open it," he said. "Figured you'd want to." The box was soft at the corners, my last name scrawled across the top in fading black ink, Bradley. I lifted the lid. Receipts, bank statements, torn envelopes. Tucked beneath them 2 spiral-bound notebooks. The handwriting was unmistakably Evan's curved, slanted, always in black ink. She'd kept lists, expenses real, and padded overdraft strategies which credit cards had room. One page stopped me cold. A scrawled note in the margin read, "Ask Mom about using Claire's trust. She won't say no if it's for them." I held it for a long time. There were also apartment applications, half-completed forms with my email listed as guarantor fake income claims emergency contacts I never agreed to. She had tried to make me responsible without ever asking. Tom didn't ask questions, just stood nearby with his hands in his pockets. "Thank you," I said. Back home, I sat at my kitchen table and laid everything out. It wasn't that I didn't know. I just hadn't seen it all at once on paper in her handwriting. It was a kind of clarity I hadn't expected, and with it a decision I hadn't realized I was already making. I called Miriam the next morning, told her about the notebooks, the applications, the language that didn't pretend anymore. She didn't ask for scans, just said bring them in. By noon, the trust had been amended. We tightened every clause. No new liens, no unauthorized access. Any attempt to alter the terms would now trigger an automatic legal freeze. We added one more layer, an external trustee, independent and incorruptible with no blood ties. The house was no longer just protected, it was sealed. That afternoon, I wrote a final letter, not to my parents, not to Evan, but to the trustee. I detailed everything: the unauthorized documents, the attempts at financial manipulation, the implication that family meant permission. I signed it, scanned it, and uploaded it to the archive. Then I sat back and closed the file. For the first time, it didn't feel like defense. It felt like choice. A choice to end the pattern. A choice to let silence mean peace, not pressure. A choice to no longer be the ledger they drew from just because I never said no out loud. I didn't send a message to Evan. I didn't call my mother. I didn't explain. There's a kind of freedom in not being owed anything, not even understanding. And maybe they'd never notice the final boundary. Maybe they would just keep walking the perimeter, wondering why the gate no longer opens. That would be their story to carry. Mine had already moved on. That Sunday, I set the table. Just one plate, one fork, one linen napkin folded beside a wine glass I hadn't used in years. The overhead light hummed softly, casting a warm halo over the oak surface I'd refinished myself 2 winters ago. I made roasted chicken with thyme and lemon, sautéed green beans, a small sweet potato split open and buttered. I poured a glass of red, nothing expensive, but it breathed well. The kind of meal I'd spent a decade planning for others down to their preferences, their allergies, their favorites. But tonight wasn't for them. There were no empty chairs, no extra settings just in case someone showed. No waiting for a doorbell or a voice down the hall asking where the napkins were. I sat slowly, took a bite, chewed, took another, let time pass like it had never been allowed to before. When I finished, I cleared the plate, washed it by hand, dried it with the towel Mom embroidered back in '92. I folded it carefully, placed it in the drawer, and turned off the kitchen light. Not because anyone was asleep, not because someone needed silence, just because it was enough.